Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I hope you have seen the last class. Those who were not present, you have seen the class. Okay, so in the last class, what we had discussed, we had completed Mughal Empire and we had started a discussion on Vijayanagar Empire. Now, when we talk about Vijayanagar Empire, another very important topic from prelims perspective, and you will see that when UPSC is asking questions from southern India, a lot of questions are coming from Vijayanagar Empire. Some of the questions are coming from Chola Empire, and a majority of the questions you will find from Vijayanagar Empire. So that topic is very important from examination perspective. In yesterday's class, we started the discussion on it, and I told you how UPSC is not only asking on terminologies or literature, but also on the important contributions of rulers. So we had discussed some of the rulers, we had discussed some of the texts as well. Here, when we talk about Vijayanagar Empire, one very important theme will be foreign travelers account. So that is also going to be a very important part of this topic. So we had discussed a few foreign travelers and what they have written as well. So go through that, revise it properly, and know what is the unique thing that a particular foreign traveler is talking about. Some of the things are going to be similar in all those accounts. For example, all of them are going to talk about natural fortification. They are going to talk about the various layers of fortification present in the city of Hampi. They will talk about the ruler having a large army, ruler having a lot of economic prosperity, or the city of Hampi having various temples as well. So these are some of the things which are going to be common in all these accounts. But there are some things which are going to be unique, and those are the areas from where UPSC asks questions in prelims. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now we had started talking about Krishna Dev Rai, and we had done majority of the discussion on Krishna Dev Rai. I will just quickly revise it because this is the most important ruler when we are talking about Vijayanagar Empire. After this, we are going to complete today Vijayanagar Empire, and then we will start our discussion on Buddhism. So again, Buddhism is a very important topic from examination perspective. When we will come to that, I will tell you the areas that you need to focus upon. Okay, so now let us start from here. In yesterday's class, I told you that when we are talking about Krishna Dev Rai, he is the ruler who was called Andhra Bhoj. And when we were discussing Mughal Empire, then also I told you how Babur is mentioning about Krishna Dev Rai, and he is saying that he is a very powerful ruler from southern part of India. So Babur had come to India in 1526. We had talked about Tujuke Babri. So in his autobiography, Babur mentions about Krishna Dev Rai as a very powerful ruler from southern India. So if these kind of statements are given, that Babur discusses details about Krishna Dev Rai in his autobiography, that is a right statement. Okay, so you should know that as well. We had discussed how when there were various smaller kingdoms, Krishna Dev Rai was able to defeat them all, and he had extended the territories belonging to Vijayanagar Empire. So successfully tackling the smaller kingdom. And at the same time, we discussed how he is maintaining a relationship with Portuguese as well as Arabs. So when we are talking about Arabs, the relationship will be commercial. When we are talking about Portuguese, at some level it is also going to be political. So in modern India, you study coming of Portuguese, and there we talk about a very important event, 1510, taking over Goa by Albuquerque from the Sultan of Bijapur. So when that had happened, this particular individual had helped Portuguese in that endeavor. So this is another fact that we can remember, since UPSC does ask questions from Portuguese as well. You see that questions on Nino di Cunha have been asked. They have asked a direct statement on Albuquerque as well. So from medieval perspective as well, we should keep this in mind, that when Portuguese are trying to extend their influence, these rulers are also coming into play. A question on the Sultan of Gujarat has already been asked. So in the context of Vijayanagar Empire as well, we should keep these things in mind. Okay, so this is another statement that you can remember that we had discussed yesterday. After that, we had started talking about his cultural contributions. That is a very important segment. A direct question in mains has also been asked on this. Okay, from prelims perspective as well, we should keep these things in mind. So when we are talking about his contributions in culture, he was a scholar himself who wrote variety of texts, and he patronized a lot of scholars too. So when we are talking about him as a scholar, he is a ruler who has written Amukta Malayat. So in Telugu language, he is composing a particular text. If you talk about Sanskrit language, he is writing Jambavati Kalyanam, he is writing Usha Parinay. So these are the texts that he is composing in Sanskrit language. So text in Telugu as well as in Sanskrit. When it comes to patronage, he is giving patronage to all these languages. Another important language becomes a Kannada, which this person has patronized. So in the context of patronage, when we talk about Kannada language, we have examples of Sanskrit and Telugu. Yesterday I talked about Shunya Sampadane. That is a Kannada text. We'll talk about Shunya Sampadane when we'll talk about Bhakti movement, because Shunya Sampadane is a collection of vachanas of Veerashaiva saints. So there we'll come back to this particular text. I'll give you the details of that text as well. Okay, so these are the things that we need to keep in mind. We had also discussed his contribution in the field of architecture, which again becomes very important. When we are talking about his contribution in architecture, again there he is a builder as well as a renovator. So he is building some new temples. For example, we can give the example of Vithala temple, we can give the example of Hazar Rama temple. When we are talking about him as a renovator, so he is renovating the older temples which are not in good shape. So here there are a few terms that you should keep in mind. Gopuram. We'll talk about these terms in temple architecture as well, but here these are the cultural contributions of a particular ruler. That is why we are talking about this in this context too. When we say Gopuram, Gopuram is a large gateway from which people enter to a temple. So what he is doing, he is adding Gopurams in temples where it was not present, or if Gopuram is present in a particular temple but it has been destroyed. So we have seen frequent attacks during the time of Delhi Sultanate. So if let's say they have been destroyed or they have not been renovated, that is why they are not in good shape. So he is doing the renovation as well. At the same time, he is someone who is adding Kalyan Mandap. Kalyan Mandap in temples. What do we mean by Kalyan Mandap? Marriage hall. So as in the temple, there is a particular chamber which is dedicated for marriage ceremonies, that is known as Kalyan Mandap. So this is a particular segment in the temple that is being added during Vijayanagar period, and then it is going to remain there. Okay, so earlier we don't find Kalyan Mandaps. From this period onwards, we are going to find Kalyan Mandaps in the temple premises. Apart from this, there is another concept of Amman Shrine. What do we mean by Amman Shrine? So there is going to be a particular Garbhagriha, a particular private chamber which will be dedicated to the chief wife of the presiding deity, not for all the wives but for the chief wife. Okay, so that is going to be Amman Shrine. This is also going to be a feature in Vijayanagar temple architecture. So if these kind of questions are being asked, Amman Shrine became a particular feature of, and they have given the name of 4 dynasties. So our answer is going to be Vijayanagar Empire. The same is going to be true about Kalyan Mandap as well. UPSC has already asked a question on Kalyan Mandap, that Kalyan Mandap was added into temple premises during and they had given the names of the 4 dynasties. It was a very simple question. Okay, now if you look at these ideas are important in your mains examination as well. You can take these examples. In social issues, there was one question which was asked, is the institution of marriage losing its divine sanctity in present times? So when we are looking at history, the concept of marriage, the practice of marriage was also added with the idea of divinity. So when we are talking about the institution itself, it was supposed to be very sacred, but it had social problems as well. So when we are writing these kind of answers, we can actually give a historical reference that how marriage was treated as a sacred institution, but at social level, women were denied equal rights, and that is how you can make your answer more relevant by giving a historical context. Okay, so these examples will serve you in your mains examination too, because at some level or the other themes are going to remain the same. Okay, so this is another feature that you should keep in mind. Now when we are talking about this particular individual, during his time a foreign traveler named Domingo Pace had traveled to Vijayanagar Empire. Now he is also going to talk about all the things that I just outlined. He is going to talk about the natural fortification, Vijayanagar Empire being a very powerful empire, Krishna Deva Raya being a very powerful ruler who is dealing very successfully with the smaller kingdoms. He is going to talk about Krishna Deva Raya having a very large army, having a very economically prosperous empire in both the context that I had discussed yesterday, in agriculture as well as in trade. So we had talked about this as well in yesterday's class, how when we are talking about agriculture, this particular individual is building various canals and in that way investing in agriculture. He is building various roads. He is trying to keep good relations with both Arabs as well as Portuguese, because they are the foreign powers who are present here as traders. So in this context, trade was also very much beneficial during this time for Vijayanagar Empire, because these entities are going to give taxes to the empire. Okay, so in that context, the empire was very prosperous, and all these things are outlined by Domingo Pace. While writing about Krishna Deva Raya, he says that Krishna Deva Raya keeps getting fits of rage. So that also tells us that probably he had observed the ruler very closely. Then only he is getting to know that he gets angry very easily. Okay, so these are also some of the amusing details that this person is giving. So in his context, we can talk about this. Yesterday we had discussed how Razak is talking about the festival of Mahanavami. He is giving the details of Mahanavami Dibba. So these are some of the unique details that can be asked in prelims. So we should keep these things in mind. Is this much clear? Now, moving forward, there was another ruler, Achyut Vardhan, not a very prominent ruler. When we are talking about rulers, keep these 4 rulers in mind. We discussed Bukka. In that context, I told you about Ganga Devi's Madhur Vijayam. Keep that in mind. Devaraya 1, his contributions. Devaraya 2, his contributions. And Krishna Deva Raya and his contributions. If you look at UPSC questions, prelims examination, UPSC has asked questions on Devaraya 1's contributions and Krishna Deva Raya's contributions. Okay, they have not given the name of Krishna Deva Raya specifically in prelims examination, but they have asked a question on Kalyan Mandap. When it comes to Devaraya 1, they have given the name. But we should keep these 4 rulers in mind and we will be at a safer place. I told you about Hampi as well. A separate question on Hampi has also been asked. So Hampi is also known as the city of Vijayanagar. Hampi was named after the local deity Pampa Devi. So these kind of details we should have in mind. If you look at UPSC questions, UPSC when we read NCERT, we often say that you have to read the old NCERT. But when it comes to Vijayanagar Empire, UPSC is asking questions from the new NCERT as well. The themes in Indian history, there is a particular chapter on Hampi. So from that chapter, questions have come. We are discussing it here in the class anyway. But if you want to read one chapter from the new NCERT, you can read this chapter on Hampi. Now let's come back here. When we are talking about Achyut Vardhan, there what becomes important, that there was a particular traveler called Nunis who had come to the empire. Now, when we are talking about Nunis, what is very important that he is giving very detailed and a vivid explanation of the social life which was present during Vijayanagar Empire. Do you know what specifically Nunis talks about? So see, when that Fayan is talking about. Fayan we had discussed during Gupta period, Chandragupta II. When we are talking about Nunis, he is coming to Vijayanagar Empire. He is writing about all those things that we have discussed. Economic prosperity, political power, huge army, natural fortification, those things are going to be common. What is very significant here is that he is mentioning at length about the status of women during Vijayanagar Empire. Now, when we are talking about Vijayanagar Empire, when we are saying that Vijayanagar rulers are adding Amman shrine in the temples, that means women are also being given a particular space. Their separate space, that is something that is being given to women. We talked about Ganga Devi composing a Madhur Vijayam. So Ganga Devi was daughter-in-law of Bukka. She is writing a text on war. That also tells us here that royal women are having access to details of wars and they are literate. They are well versed in literary tradition. Then only they are writing. Second thing, they are writing about a particular space where women were denied. Women were not given space when it comes to war. Okay, so she is writing about war, she is writing about victory. That is also telling us about the important position that royal women had in Vijayanagar Empire. We are not talking about common women, we are talking about royal women enjoying a better status. And in this context, Nunis is giving us very vivid details of the condition of women who are employed in royal services. So he is saying that these women are good archers, these women are good writers, they are record keepers, they are writing about the history of Vijayanagar Empire, they are comparing the texts from other kingdoms and then they are writing comparative details as well. He is writing that these women are judges, these women are also gatekeepers. So he is giving us a detail of various professions. He is saying that these women are soothsayers, these women are these women are predicting people's future. So not only astrologers but they are also soothsayers. Soothsayer क्या होता है? जो भविष्यवाणी करता है कि बोल दिया ऐसा हो जाएगा. That person is called a soothsayer. When we say astrologer, that means they are looking into texts, they are looking into planetary positions and then they are making a prediction. So he is saying that women are involved in these professions as well. So what we understand here, that women are involved in literary work, women are involved in physical work where they have to be archers, where they have to fight, they are involved in that as well. He is saying that they are judges, they are astrologers, they are soothsayers. He is saying that they are also gatekeepers. So in all the variety of positions, we see that women were also employed. What is the key detail here? That they are employed in royal service in the city of Hampi. That is the key detail here, that these women are employed in royal service. Is this clear? So keep these things in mind, that when we are talking about Vijayanagar Empire, this is a striking difference that we find here, that royal women had better position. Not only they are literate, but they are employed in variety of professions. Is this clear? So this is why the account of Nunis stands out to us. After that, we see that in 1565 there was this battle of Talai Kota or Banni Hati as it is known. This battle was fought and Vijayanagar ruler Ram Rai was defeated. So in yesterday's class, I told you that there was Bahmani kingdom and we talked about Firoz Shah fighting with Devrai I. Now, he is the one ruler who is a remarkable ruler who stands out. Otherwise, you will see in Bahmani kingdom there are not much personalities which are very who are going to stand out. There was another personality, Mahmud Gawan. So that was a minister to a particular ruler. Okay, otherwise wherever you will study Bahmani kingdom, you will study it with respect to Vijayanagar empire. Okay, in yesterday's class only I told you that you will not find a single question on Bahmani kingdom in the past 10 years, be it in prelims or be it in mains. So the name that you can keep in mind, that is of Firoz Shah, that we had discussed yesterday. Now what had happened when Bahmani kingdom had disintegrated? It was disintegrated into various smaller kingdoms. That is also something that we had covered in yesterday's class. Here what you need to keep in mind, that they are going to come together to fight against Vijayanagar empire, and Vijayanagar ruler Ram Rai was defeated, and from here we see a period of decline. Then also Vijayanagar empire did continue, and we had seen this in yesterday's class that till 1646 it is going to survive. After that, what happened? Wadiyar dynasty took over, and from Wadiyar dynasty in 1761 Hyder Ali declared himself the de facto sultan. After him, Tipu Sultan is going to take over. And then 1799 Fourth Anglo-Mysore War, Tipu Sultan was defeated, killed, and British are going to take over the larger territories of Mysore. Some part of it was given to Krishnadeva Chik III, and they had reinstalled the Wadiyar dynasty in some parts of the Vijayanagar, some parts of the Mysore kingdom. That is how it proceeds. From here you study it in modern India. This is the part which is not going to be in your syllabus, but you should know how history has proceeded. That is why I am giving you this detail. Is this clear? So this is going to be the political details that we should know. Now, if we talk about the administrative system of Vijayanagar empire, there you find Amar Nayakar system or Nayak system. What do we mean by Nayak system? Who are the Nayaks? Okay, so what is happening? We had discussed this in the earlier classes, that whenever there is a particular empire, it is going to be divided into various provinces, subdivided into various districts, again subdivided into villages, and rulers used to appoint their people here at the provincial level. Now Nayaks are such authority. The term which is used, Amar Nayakar system, or you will also find the term Nayak. Nayaks were also known as polygars. These are the terms that you will come across in modern Indian history as well. Polygars or Nayaks. So these are the people who are going to be present at that time too. Okay. So Nayaks were also known as polygars. Now what used to happen, that these Nayaks were entrusted with administrative responsibilities. This thing is going to remain the same. We had already discussed it. Here only the terminology is going to change. These Nayaks are going to be entrusted with the responsibility of revenue collection as well as maintenance of troops. Okay. In turn, what they have to do, they have to stay loyal to the Raya, to the ruler. Okay. And in yesterday's class, we talked about the festival of Mahanavami and Mahanavami Dibba. So what used to happen, that these Nayaks used to go to, even if you go to Mysore in present times, Mysore Dashehra is very famous. Okay, if you go by the mythology as well, it is that place where Durga is killing Mahishasur in that region. So she is coming from Vindhyas and going till present day Mysorean territory, and that is why you will see that their Dashera is celebrated at a very large scale, or Mahanavami festival has been historically celebrated in that region with very much glory. Okay, so in this context, during Vijayanagar Empire, we see that they had created a platform that was called Mahanavami Dibba. Dibba, that means platform. So Mahanavami Dibba was constructed, and on this Dibba here we see a lot of sculptures as well. And on Mahanavami Dibba, the royalty is going to perform the rituals. What used to happen, these polygars, these Nayaks are going to come and they are going to express their loyalty to the Raya on the day of Mahanavami. So on that day, they are going to give him gifts. They are going to say that we are loyal to you. So in that context, this ritualistic aspect also had a political meaning, where the ruler is asserting his authority and Nayaks are subverting to the ruler and expressing their loyalty. Is this clear? So this is another thing that we should keep in mind when we are talking about the administrative system. Nayak or Amar Nayak system becomes important. Nayaks were also known as polygars, and when Vijayanagar Empire will disintegrate gradually in various parts of that region, these Nayaks are going to come up with their own kingdoms. So at many times you will see that a particular representative of Vijayanagar Empire is granting these people, granting Dutch or British or French the right to establish their factories. So you come across these terms. Who are these people? These Nayaks who have started asserting their authorities, be it in the region of present day Andhra, Karnataka, or some parts of Kerala too. Is this clear? So they are going to establish their own kingdoms, smaller kingdoms in the coming times when the ruler will be weaker at the center. What we need to keep in mind from our examination perspective, what these terms denote, what is the Amar Naikar system, and which dynasty does it belong to. I hope this is clear. So now let us move forward. This was the administrative detail. When we talk about the economy during Vijayanagar period, what is important in economy? So in agriculture, we see agriculture is flourishing. Why agriculture is flourishing? Tungabhadra Doab. Okay, so again in north we talk about Ganga Yamuna Doab, here we talk about Tungabhadra Doab. So Doab is present here as well. Good production was happening. Rulers are going to invest in providing irrigation facilities. In yesterday's class, we talked about Devrai first, who built a dam on Tungabhadra river and who established a chain of canals in the agricultural areas. When we talk about Krishnadevaraya, he also built various canals to provide irrigation facility to the agriculturalists. So of course agriculture is going to boom in this region. When we are talking about pastoralism, again more or less the same, craft production more or less the same. When trade is happening here, not only internal but also external trade is going to happen at large scale. With whom are these people going to trade? They are going to trade with Central Asia. They are going to trade with Southeast Asia. They are going to trade with Europe. With all these regions, they are going to have trading relations. So that means with this long distance trade, they are also able to gain a lot of economic prosperity. And when this trade is happening in the foreign accounts itself, we find a particular term called Phanam. Phanam denotes gold coins, because when we talk about trade of luxurious items, often the exchange material would be of gold coin. Okay, so in this context, we keep finding this term being mentioned in foreign travelers' accounts, Phanam. What do we mean by Phanam? Coins. I had already told you when we were talking about ancient India, wherever you find a specific term for coins, you should keep that in mind. From Vijayanagar Empire, UPSC has asked these terms. It asked what do we mean by Phanam. That means coins. So in ancient India, we find a variety of terms, and I kept telling you that this is a term that you should keep in mind. Okay, because UPSC is focusing upon terms of economic importance. And here we should keep this term in mind. They have asked questions on irrigation. Who built a dam and a series of canals, again related to economy. Is this clear? So keep this in mind, and their trading relation with various regions and how trade was also beneficial for them. So that means they have huge wealth at their disposal. When we talk about huge wealth being at their disposal, they are going to invest both in patronizing literature as well as in architecture. We have seen the examples with rulers, that how they are building huge architecture, how they are patronizing a lot of literary scholars, they are writing texts themselves. Okay, we will separately discuss the architecture section when we will discuss temple architecture, but here you should keep these things in mind, how there is a particular background to patronizing the temples. Now, this is what you should keep in mind when it comes to economy. When we talk about polity, we have discussed the administration. Now, if we come to society, has something changed? Varna system will be present. Jati system or caste system is going to be present. If we talk about the category of women, there we see a particular difference, that too in the context of royal women. So their status is better. We know the examples of Ganga Devi. We know what Muniz is talking about, that these women are employed in variety of professions in the city of Hampi in royal services. So that is one thing that we should keep in mind, that when we are talking about the condition of women, royal women or women from higher Varna, they are in relatively better condition. Okay. When we come to religion, particularly these people are going to patronize Shaivism, but Vaishnavism will also be present, Jainism will also be present. I have told you that you need to remember this by logic, that when we are talking about the state of Karnataka, Jainism is going to be present. We talked about the site of Shravanabel Gol. So that is going to be present. Whether the ruler is patronizing it or not, that is a different question. It will remain in that particular area. When we talk about Buddhism, we don't find any references to the presence of Buddhism by this time. Is this clear? We had discussed the difference between Islamic and Islamicate in the last class. What is the difference? People who are present, what is the difference between Islamic and Islamicate? See, when we use the term Islamic, it denotes the religious connotation. It has very specific religious connotation. Islamic, that means following the religious tenets of Islam. When we use the term Islamicate, see, these are technical terms which we often don't familiarize ourselves with, and we use the wrong term. For example, if we have to talk about influence on architecture, the term that we should be using is Islamicate. Okay, and in the Hindu, you will find a few articles over this. There is this particular scholar that I gave you the reference of, Philip Wagner, who has written a very beautiful piece, Sultan Among Hindu Kings, and in that piece he is talking about the difference between these two terms, Islamic and Islamicate. When we use the term Islamicate, it particularly talks about the cultural influence of Islam. So when we talk about any religion, there is a particular culture associated with it. What kind of culture? In linguistic terms, there will be a culture. When we talk about the dressing pattern, when we talk about the food pattern, that is also associated with that. So when we talk about these Vijayanagar rulers, they had Islamicate influence. Islamicate influence in what sense? They are also using the title Sultan to denote power. The name of the article is like that only, Sultan amongst Hindu kings. Okay, so they are using the title Sultan. They are wearing kabai and kullai. What do we mean by kabai and kullai? Kullai is the long coat and kabai is the long cap. We have discussed this particular term various times. Sorry, kullai is the cap and kabai is the coat. Okay, so this is a term that we should remember from our examination perspective as well. We had discussed how UPSC has asked a question on Kuladharan. What do we mean by Kuladharan? They had given 4 options. So Sayyids were known as Kuladharan. So the term Kula, cap, becomes important. Okay, so we had talked about these terms when we were discussing Delhi Sultanate, when we were discussing Razia Sultana, that she started wearing kabai and kulai and she started coming to the court. Here we see that rulers, when they are present in courts, they are wearing kulai and kabai. When they are sitting on ritualistic things, when they are doing rituals, performing yajnas, sacrifices, then they are wearing a dhoti like dress with a janu. Okay, so there is a difference between the political realm and the religious realm. So we see the influence in the political culture here. Okay, that is another influence. We see the influence in architecture. So when we see women's quarters, that was known as Lotus Mahal as well, there we find the presence of arches and dome. So in that particular context, again we see Islamicate influence. That too in the women's quarter. So you will often see that women are supposed to be the carriers of culture. And here also that is visible. So that is another thing which you find here, which is unique and which tells us about the cultural assimilation which was happening. It gives a very strong counter to this particular idea that was being put forward earlier, that how Vijayanagar Empire was a Hindu response to Islamic rule. When we are talking about history, things are not always like that. Things here we also see a history of assimilation, and that is that is a very strong reference which tells us about the history of assimilation as well. There might have been fights, there might have been differences, but there are histories of assimilation and peacefully coexisting, as Akbar would have said it, that is also present. Is this clear? Chalo, so this is something that you need to keep in mind when we are talking about culture. Now, in culture, language will also come, literature will also come. We have seen the examples already, particularly of Telugu literature, Sanskrit and Kannada literature. That is something that you should keep in mind. Now, when we are talking about architecture, that is a section that we will deal with separately when we will talk about temple architecture. Now, here, keep this thing in mind when we are talking about the city of Hampi. It's a very unique city. Why it's a very unique city, Hampi or Vijayanagar? Why it's a unique city? Because these people are constantly engaged in warfare with Bahmani kingdom. If you remember, when we were talking about Delhi Sultanate, I told you one specific thing, that when wars used to happen, and especially in the Rajputana region, the forts were so strong that they were not impregnable at most of the times. So what rulers used to do? फोर्ट है, घेरा डाल के बैठ जाएंगे, 6 महीने बैठे हैं, 8 महीने बैठे हैं, कभी तो बाहर रहेंगे. You will need supplies, food supply or anything which is of daily usage. You will have to come out of the fort and then the attack will happen. Okay. Here what is happening in the city of Hampi, it's a very unique city because it has a lot of chambers. Royal chamber where political architecture will be present. Sacred area where temples are going to be present. There will be one layer of fortification. Then there are going to be agricultural area and then another layer of fortification. So they are building the agricultural area inside the premises of the city, and this is why it is very unique, because when we talk about existence of a city, people there are engaged in non-agricultural production. We talk about craft production, we talk about services, we talk about trade, we talk about political head living there, we talk about royalty, we talk about people belonging to nobility living there. We don't talk about peasant living within the premises of a city. Then it becomes a village. Okay. Here we see this very unique thing, that how agricultural premises was also incorporated within the premises of the city, probably to help themselves when wars are happening. Yahi उगाएंगे, कैसे घेरा डालोगे? So this is a very smart thing that we find in the city of Hampi. Okay, royal space, sacred space, and also an agricultural space. So if these kind of statements are given, that the city of Hampi also had agricultural tracts within it. Our basic logic will be, how can a city have agricultural tract within it? We'll mark it a wrong statement. But the city of Hampi is a very unique city in this context. Is this clear? So keep this in mind when we are talking about the city of Hampi, royal chamber, sacred chamber, then agricultural sector, all these are included within the city. I hope this is clear. Here in the city, another, apart from the temples, another structure that we need to keep in mind, that is Mahanavmi Dibba. Okay. So keep these things in mind when we are talking about here temples. We should also keep in mind the idea of temple centered urbanization. So we have discussed it, how a particular kind of urbanization develops due to the existence of the city. And here the city of Hampi can also be seen as a trade center. So there were various platforms where we find wooden passed holes. तो यहाँ पे हो सकता है कि ऐसे लगा के तंबू जैसा, and they used to create here they used to create shops. Okay, so this is the kind of archaeological evidence that we find within the premises of the temple. Okay, and when the foreign travelers are coming, they are writing at length about these things. Yesterday we talked about these things, how Razak is writing about people being very fond of roses, how these people are selling fragrances, how these people are selling precious stones out in the open market. So be it from architectural perspective, be it from archaeological perspective, or be it from literary perspective, we do have evidences of Hampi being a trade city, and trade had developed due to temple centered urbanization. Okay, so this is also a very unique thing when we talk about Hampi as a city. It can be understood as an economic center, it can be understood as a political center, it can be understood as a religious center. Is this clear? So these are the things that we need to keep in mind when we are talking about Vijayanagar Empire. If there is any doubt, ask, otherwise we will move forward to the next topic. Clear hai sab? Chale. Now there were some smaller kingdoms that I had told you that you need to keep the reference, Yadav. So we had talked about it when we were talking about Alauddin Khilji, that how they are attacking here. Here the name that we come across is of Ramachandra. The capital was Devagiri, or the when we talk about Muhammad bin Tughlaq coming here, he had changed the name to Daulatabad. So we should know that these people are contemporaries to Khiljis. Okay. Then we come across another dynasty. These details have been given in the notes that have been uploaded. Okay, so quick revision material we have uploaded that the team has prepared, and there you will find the details of these dynasties that you should keep in mind. From logical perspective, you should keep this in mind that they are contemporary to Delhi Sultanate. When we talk about Kakatiyas, so again Kakatiyas were also one kingdom that was frequently raided. We had talked about Kakatiyas as well when we were discussing Alauddin Khilji, Hoysalas, how they were also frequently attacked. Vijayanagar Empire is going to come at the place of Kakatiyas. They were feudatories of Kakatiyas. Okay, so when we are talking about Kakatiyas, one very important ruler is going to be Rudrama Devi. So she is one of the female rulers who ruled as queen regent. She will also make a temple. Another ruler that will be important that we can keep in mind, Rudra Dev. Okay, here they had an important port named Motupalli. That is one site that you can keep in mind. When we are talking about Hoysalas, they become important in the context of temple architecture. Often Hoysala temples are in news. So Hoysaleswar, Halebidu, Bellur, these areas you should keep in mind that these areas are important from cultural perspective and they are belonging to Hoysala kingdom. We'll talk about it briefly when we'll come to temple architecture. Okay, so these are some of the names that you should keep in mind. Now UPSC doesn't go into the nitty-gritties of the rulers because not a lot of work has been done when it comes to a a proper political history. At some places you will find economic references, at some places you will find cultural references, and if they are in news, then UPSC has asked a question on that. Otherwise, they have asked a question on chronology, and if you look at the questions, you can solve it very easily. One question I had shown you, where they had given Yadav, Pandyas, Kakatiyas, Hoysalas, and they had asked which one of them existed in the first half of 8th century CE. None of them would have existed back then. Okay, so these kind of questions you will find which can be solved on the basis of logic. But if anything is in the news or has been in the news in the past 1 year, you should know about those details. If a particular port has been in news, you should know about that port. If a particular temple has been in news, you should know about that. So in that context, you should remember that dynasty for that year. Is this clear? So this is our medieval Indian history that we have completed. We talked about Delhi Sultanate, we talked about Mughal Empire. When we come to southern India, we talked about Cholas in detail, we talked about Vijayanagar Empire at great length. So these are the things that you need to keep in mind. We have also discussed the cultural history along with discussing ancient and medieval India. So those are also part of art and culture that you need to keep in mind. Apart from that, there are some topics which needs to be dealt separately in art and culture. For example, when we talk about Buddhism, Jainism, when we talk about temple architecture or bhakti movement or dance forms or music, they are the topics that need to be dealt separately. So that is what we are going to start now. I hope you have gone through the material that has been uploaded. सारा नहीं पढ़ा है तो कुछ तो पढ़ा होगा. Okay, so material for medieval India has already been uploaded. Please go through that once as well, and whatever we are discussing in class, that you should read. So most of the things are going to be overlapping. Some of the things you might find here in class which might not have been written there. So what you have to do, you just have to write it there so that you have one material as your revision material. कुछ भी add करना है, घटाना है, वो एक ही material में करना है. You don't need to have separate documents because that is going to take up your time unnecessarily and you will keep getting confused. Okay, so go through that material. Now what we are going to do, we will start with Buddhism and Jainism. I hope things are clear in ancient and medieval. समझ आ गई हैं चीजें? एक बार questions practice कर लेंगे. अभी यहाँ आज तो नहीं है मेरे पास. And maybe in tomorrow's class we can practice that. Okay. Now let us start with Buddhism. When we are talking about Buddhism and Jainism, what is the importance of these topics in our examination? Both the topics are very important. If we talk about the most important topic in art and culture, one of the topics has to be Buddhism. Because every year, literally every year in your prelims examination, you can find one question on Buddhism, either direct question or indirect question. Either they'll ask you about Buddhist philosophy, or they'll ask you about Buddhist literature, or they'll ask you about the differences between Buddhism and Jainism, or they'll ask you about the similarities between Buddhism and Jainism, or they'll give you a name of a scholar and they'll ask you whether this scholar is Buddhist or Jain or belonging to Brahmanical tradition, or they'll ask you about a Buddhist site and they might give it as Buddhist site, or they might give it as Jain site or some other site. So when it comes to literature, philosophy, literature, sites, terms, it becomes important in Buddhism. Okay. Now here you don't need to mug up how old Buddha was when he left his home, or how old he was when he is getting Nirvana. These are not the things that UPSC is asking. What UPSC is asking, and this is a topic from where you will find very in-depth questions. In-depth questions when it comes to philosophy. What is the philosophy of Buddhism? What are the literary pieces that are associated with Buddhism? Some of the texts we have already discussed when we were discussing ancient India. For example, we talked about Nagasen, we talked about Nagarjun, we talked about Ashwaghosh. These are Buddhist writers. Okay, so those are also the things that you need to keep in mind. We kept talking about some sites as well. We were talking, when we talked about Satvahans, we talked about the site of Karla, Bhaja, Amravati, Nagarjun Konda, Kanheri. These are Buddhist sites. Okay, so those are also the things that you need to keep in mind. And there I kept saying that these things we need to understand if we want to have a holistic understanding of Buddhism. Okay, here what we are going to do, we are going to understand the philosophy in a consolidated manner. Is this clear? So these are the arenas that you need to put your focus upon. In prelims, this is the area from where UPSC is asking majority of the questions. Some questions are going to be a mix of philosophy and architecture. These kind of questions are mostly asked in mains. In mains examination also, every second year or third year you can expect a question on Buddhist philosophy and literature. In prelims, the weightage is even more. Okay. Now, keeping that in mind, let us talk about the historical background in which Buddhist philosophy is originating and becoming popular. We are talking about 6th century BCE. We have studied this historical background. What was happening in 6th century BCE? If we talk about it, let's talk about it like this: economic, political, social, religious and cultural. What was happening? So what was the economic lifestyle of later Vedic period? So in political realm, we can talk about coming of Mahajanpad, various states. What were you saying? Okay, division is happening at social level, Varna system. When we talk about economy, agriculture is there, pastoralism is there, craft is there, trade is there. All these things were present. What else do you remember? Not good. Dasas, dasyus. So there is discrimination. Inclusivity is not there. That is one problem. Now let us understand it. When we are talking about agriculture and when we are talking about the present ritualistic aspect of this time period, sacrifice was very important. When we talk about Vedic culture, we understand the importance of yajna or sacrifice for that particular culture. When sacrifice is happening, when oblation was being offered, it was not only of grains but also of animals. Animals were also being sacrificed. Now, when we are talking about agriculture, cattle is going to become important. And people, when people are pastoralists, they wouldn't mind oblating these cattle in the yajna, in the sacrifice. But when they are becoming agriculturalists, cattle will become a very important form of wealth for them, and they are not going to like the idea of cattle sacrifice. So we know that there is a certain problem which was present there. What is this problem? In one word, we can say violence. Okay, that is one problem. If we talk about, let's say, trade, we have talked about Varna system: Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. Traditionally, if we talk about production work, it was accorded to the Vaishya Varna. So these are the people who are practicing agriculture, these are the people who are pastoralist people, crafts people, and at the same time traders as well. And they are paying huge taxes to the state. They are primarily involved in production process, paying taxes to the state, and at the same time, their social status is just above the Shudras. So for these people, it was a big thing. They are going to mind these things because for them, this was the structure which was very important to them. So their economic status and their social status, that is not equal. So they are also not going to like this system. Okay, and traders, you'll see traders are going to become primary patron apart from the royalty when it comes to Buddhism. Okay, so this is one problem that is existing. Second, when we are talking about political status, we see that there are a lot of states fighting with each other for supremacy, extending their area of influence and forming a larger empire eventually. Okay, so here these people are engaged in violence all the time. Traders will not like that because for trade to happen peacefully, you need a peaceful environment if you want trade to flourish. So for them, violence is also a problem, social status is also a problem. When we are talking about these rulers, they are fighting, they are risking their lives, and they are trying to expand their area of influence. And at the end, what is happening? There is a priest whom you have to give donation to provide you legitimacy. We talked about the interrelationship between Rajan and Purohit. Rajan will not be happy with that interrelationship all the time because they are the ones who are putting in effort into fighting wars, into ensuring victories for themselves, and in the end they have to gain legitimacy from the Purohit. So they are also not going to be very happy with this particular system. So in Purohit class, which was supposed to be from Kshatriya Varna, they are also not happy with the system. When we were talking about male members of these three Varna, they were called Dvija. Dvija, that means twice born. These were the people who had the right to study Veda. So when we talk about Shudra, male and women in general, they were not given the right to study Veda. So here another problem is exclusivity. That is another problem that we come across, and it is also true for non-Aryans. These are the people who are Aryan people. The whole system is a Vedic system which is catering to Aryans. So when they are discriminatory amongst themselves, they are going to be discriminatory towards people of non-Aryan identity as well. So exclusivity is another problem that we come across. Coming to the religious and cultural aspect, we saw that how Dana Stuti had become very prominent. That means costly rituals and importance of intermediary. That was also present, that you have to give certain donation to the Purohit so that the Purohit can perform a yajna or sacrifice for you. So role of intermediary, importance of Dan Stuti, all these things are going to make rituals very costly for common people. And at the same time, when we talk about the philosophy, it was becoming difficult for people to comprehend those philosophical ideas for two reasons. Once, they don't have access to that particular language now because a majority of the population has been deprived from the right to education. So they don't understand the language, and at the same time rituals were also becoming complicated. We see philosophical elements entering the literary arena of these religious texts. So what is happening? Costly and complex rituals. That is going to be a problem at this point of time. Now think about what you have studied about Buddhism and Jainism. Both the philosophies are emphasizing upon the importance of non-violence. They are offering a counter to the violence which was present there. So they are talking about non-violence, they are talking about inclusivity, they are saying that whatever gender, whatever caste, varna identity you belong to, you can be a part of our philosophical tradition. So they are inclusive in nature, and their doors are open not only for Aryans but also for non-Aryan people. So exclusivity was the problem of that particular time, and both Buddhism and Jainism, they are offering inclusivity to people. When we talk about costly rituals, they are questioning it. They are questioning the complexity which was present in religious realm. What they are saying, you have to give us alms, bhiksha, and that is also fixed. They are saying कि एक बोल से ज़्यादा आम नहीं ले सकते. So when we are talking about the costly nature of religion, they are attacking the idea of sacrifice. They are questioning the idea of costly rituals, and they are saying that you just have to provide us alms if we are asking for it. So when we are looking at the nature, it is not going to be costly for people. They are questioning the complex philosophies, they are questioning the complex rituals, and what they are talking about, very simple lifestyle. The whole philosophy of Buddhism and Jainism is revolving around lifestyle changes. So they are not delving into unnecessary questions of those times. Buddha is clearly saying that I am not concerned with how Atman is meeting Brahman, whether it is meeting or not, how the universe is being formed. I am not going to get indulged in these kinds of debate. He is preaching a very simple philosophy which is based on making changes in one's lifestyle. He is preaching the ideas of morality. So that is not something which is complex, that is something which is going to be appealing to people, because that is a very simple idea that he is teaching, and that too in a very simple manner. A very simple example I'll give you when we are talking about Buddha preaching. So there was this, you might have heard this story, that there was this woman whose child had died. So Buddha was preaching at one place, and the woman goes to Buddha, and the woman asks Buddha that you are so charismatic, make my child alive. Buddha did not give her a sermon on the idea of life and death and how this cycle is present. He simply asked her that give me some grain from a house where nobody has died. She is going, knocking on the door. She is asking a woman for a bowl of rice. The woman is offering her a bowl of rice. Then she is asking the next question, has someone died in your house? She said yes. She is moving on to the next door, repeating the very same process. And when she has toured the whole village, she was not able to find a single house where no death had happened. By this simple exercise, she understood that death is the ultimate reality of life. So Buddha did not give her a sermon on the idea of life and death and how death is the ultimate reality of our lives. He just asked her to do a particular thing, and she understood on her own. So this is a very simple way in which Buddha is teaching people very simple ideas of life, and it is going to be appealing to people. So when we talk about the similarities between Buddhism and Jainism, both the religions are emphasizing upon the idea of non-violence. Both the religions are inclusive in nature. They are not asking people to perform costly rituals, and they are talking about lifestyle changes. They are talking about simple moral philosophical ideas. That is going to be the similarities. There are going to be differences as well that we will study when we are going to move on with the topic. Is this much clear? Now if you know these terms will be helpful in mains as well, because when philosophy is being asked, you have to write these terms. You cannot write the whole story ki causes kya hai. Generally when we read, I have seen students, when they read the topic of Buddhism, they study what are the causes, what is the reason for success of Buddhism, what are the philosophies that Buddha is teaching. So for truth, and they study the eightfold path. What is the reason for decline? Khatam Buddhism. इसमें से एक क्वेश्चन भी नहीं पूछेगा यूपीएससी, एटलीस्ट पिछले कुछ सालों में तो नहीं पूछा है. इतने सिंपल क्वेश्चंस नहीं पूछे हैं. पूछा गया है डीप फिलोसॉफिकल आइडियाज. व्हाट इज द आइडिया ऑफ बोधिसत्व? व्हाट इज द आइडिया ऑफ paramitas. When we are talking about Buddha, how Buddha is represented, what are the texts which are attributed to Buddhism. These are the questions which are being asked now. It would have been helpful for you if you were giving the examination in earlier times. Now the nature of questions have changed. So I have given you this background, but we don't have to limit ourselves here. We have to go a bit further and delve deeper into this topic. I hope this much is clear. Okay, so we know that this is going to be the crux of their philosophy. How he is going to preach the philosophy, what are going to be the deeper ideas that we are going to discuss now. Now, when we talk about Buddha, he was a prince born into the Shakya family. That is why he was also known as Shakya Muni. So if we talk about the terms that are used for Buddha, that is Shakya Muni, that is Tathagat. So these are the terms that he is using for himself. He has been called Shakya Muni, he has been called Buddha, he has been called Siddhartha, he has been called Tathagat as well. Is this clear? So remember this when we are talking about Buddhism from examination perspective, that he is using various terminologies for himself. Okay. Now when we talk about Buddha, see, think about it from Buddhist perspective. For a Buddhist monk or nun or for a Buddhist follower, what are the things which are going to be important? Buddha is the one who is preaching the philosophy of Buddhism. So of course the whole personality of Buddha is going to be important for them. He is the philosopher, he is the preacher. So when we talk about it from a perspective of, let's say, a Buddhist, birth of Buddha will be important. Because if Buddha is taking birth, then only he is going to grow up, he is going to teach the philosophy of Buddhism. Okay. Now when Buddha is born, that is an important event, but Buddha was born as a prince. So he was born to Shuddhodhan, and then there is this Shuddhodhan and Mahamaya, the parents, and then Mahamaya is going to die and he was brought up by the aunt Mahaprajapati Gautami. That is the factual detail that we know of. When he was born, there was this particular soothsayer who said that either Buddha is going to be a Chakravartin, that is a world conqueror, or he will become a Sannyasin, that is a ascetic. This was the soothsaying that had happened back then. Now if there is a ruler would want the son to become a Chakravartin, that is a world conqueror, not an ascetic. So Shuddhodhan is going to do all the efforts to keep Buddha engaged in worldly pleasures. If Buddha had been engaged in worldly pleasure all the time, he would not have achieved nirvana, he would not have become Buddha. So what happens eventually? Buddha gets married to Yashodhara. Buddha has a son named Rahul. And if you look at these terminologies also, this tells you about the deeper philosophy. What do we mean by Rahul? Raste ka kanta. If you look at the literal meaning of the term, that is raste ka kanta. So again, if you look at a person getting married, the person get more entrenched in marriage when they have kids. Traditionally, that is what happens. So he also gets a kid. Now after that, one day, what is happening, that Buddha is leaving the palace for a lovely walk and he is witnessing four sights. He is looking at an old man, he is looking at a sick man, he is looking at a dead man, and interestingly all these are male. That also tells you about the time period, that how the boundaries are clearly defined for women and men. Okay, so he is looking at an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and then he is looking at an ascetic, and he realizes that these three are in sorrow, and when I am witnessing calm, it is on the face of that sannyasin, that ascetic. Then he get very disturbed. Now these are these stories which we find in Buddhist texts. It seems a bit unbelievable that a man of his age had never experienced what fever is or what sickness is. So these are the things that have been mentioned in some of the texts. There are texts which tells us that Buddha witnessed a particular fight over river water and how it is going to be divided. That is where he is going to change his mind. So all kind of things are there. What becomes important, that eventually he is leaving the palace in the middle of night. Okay, and that event is known as, I am writing the original terms here. Okay, in English we use the term leaving the palace. If we use the technical term, that is known as Mahabhinishkraman. So we should know these terms as well, because UPSC is focusing a lot on terminologies. So what becomes important? The second event, Buddha leaving the palace. He is going to leave the palace in the middle of night with the help of the charioteer Channa, and he leaves Channa and his horse Kanthak there, and he is going to go out. Now when Buddha is going, he followed a lot of methods. So he is going to follow the method of extreme penance. He is going to go wander with various ascetics which were present at that time. See, there are a lot of philosophies which were present in 6th century BCE. With the literary references, we know that as many as 60 philosophies were present at that point of time. Which one became relevant? Buddhism and Jainism. Why? Because they are answering the questions that people were having. They are offering the solutions to the problems that people were facing. Otherwise we will come across, we are diverging a bit, but you should know about these names as well. If we talk about, let's say, Ajivikas, we discussed that when we were talking about Bindusar, son of Chandragupta, then we talked about Bindusar for being a follower of Ajivika sect. We don't have any texts which exist from Ajivika sect. We find the references to Ajivikas in Buddhist and Jain texts, because they are going to question the ideas that Ajivikas were propagating. These people are talking about the importance of karma. What we do is very important, be it Buddhism or be it Jainism. What Ajivikas were saying? They were saying that everything is already decided. Fate का बात कर रहे हैं, that it is in, if it is in our fate, we are going to get it, otherwise we will not get it. So they are questioning the importance of karma. They are leaving everything in the hands of destiny. They are believing in the idea of fate, and that is where the huge difference lies when we talk about Buddhism and Jainism versus Ajivikas. Then there is Charvak, जो कह रहे हैं उधार लो लेकिन घी पियो, एक ही जिंदगी है, we have gotten one life, we should enjoy as much as we can, even if we have to borrow wealth from somebody else. That is what Charvaks are saying. So that is their philosophy. Okay, so these kind of philosophies are also existing side by side, but what is going to become prominent? Buddhism and Jainism. And if we compare these two, Buddhism was much more prominent. Okay, now coming back here, so when Buddha is going, Buddha is meeting all these people. Buddha is trying to follow various methods to gain knowledge, to achieve Bodhi. What happened eventually? He realized that I am not going to give myself extreme penance, and he started meditating. So he started meditating where? In Gaya, on the banks of Niranjana river, and that is where he achieved knowledge, nirvana, that is Bodhi, Buddhi. So he is attaining knowledge, he is attaining nirvana. So if Buddha is achieving nirvana, bodhi, knowledge, then only he is going to preach this philosophy to others. So that is going to become another important event in Buddha's life. Okay. Now if he had learnt everything, but he is not going to preach it to people, it would not have reached towards the general population. So for that, what will become important? Dharma Chakra Parivartan, the first sermon. Okay, so here we see that is birth, here leaving the palace, Nirvan achieving the ultimate knowledge. And when we talk about Dharma Chakra Parivartan or Dhamma Chakra Parivartan, that is the first sermon. Okay, and then the next event is going to be, which is going to be important, will be Mahaparinirvan, death of Buddha. Mahaparinirvan, that was the death of Buddha. This is birth of Buddha. Now, from our examination perspective, why am I going into so much detail of these events? And I am telling you the story like this. It could have been told in a very simple, factual manner. I am telling you the story in this manner so that you understand what is important from examination perspective. These terms are important. Now, instead of covering them separately, we have covered it at the same place. When we talk about birth, Lumbini, that will be an important site, Kapilavastu, Lumbini. When we are talking about Mahavinishkraman, so of course when he is leaving the palace, the setup is going to be the same. Lumbini, when we are talking about Nirvan, the site which will become important will be Bodh Gaya or Gaya. So Lumbini, Bodh Gaya. When we are talking about Dhamma Chakra Parivartan, the site of Sarnath, to be specific, Mriga 1. When we talk about Mahaparinirvan, the site is Kusinara, or as we know it today, Kushinagar. So these are the sites which are going to be important in Buddha's life. Okay. Now, if we talk about how Buddha has been represented, so that is also something that we can cover here itself. Now, this is one topic which disturbs students a lot, because UPSC had asked one question one year about one particular mudra, how Buddha has been represented symbolically. Now, people started mugging up all the mudras. You need to know about the important mudras. Okay, so what is going to happen? Let's say if Buddhism is becoming very popular, so people are going to make stupas. We'll talk about it when we'll come to architecture section. So stupa is a commemorative structure which became important in Buddhism. Now, if people are making a stupa, what they are going to represent there? Important events in Buddha's lives. Then they are going to represent important stories which are going to tell us important philosophies. So stories and incidents from Jatak, which is a collection of Buddha's previous lives. Okay, so they are going to mention all these events there, be it birth of Buddha, be it Mahavinishkraman, or be it Nirvana, or the first sermon Dhamma Chakra Parivartan, or Mahaparinirvana. So these are the events which are going to be shown on the stupa walls. Now, when these events are going to be represented on stupa walls, Buddha, so we don't find the tradition of sculpture making of deities back then. So when we don't find sculptures of deities, how people are going to represent Buddha? In symbolic form. They'll represent him in symbols. And with the coming of Mahayana Buddhism, what became important is making Buddha idols, making sculptures of Buddha. So when making Buddha idols will become prominent, then they are going to represent these events in mudra form. For example, let me tell you this in this form. When we are talking about the birth of Buddha being represented, it will be represented as Maya's dream. Who is Maya? Maya is the mother. Maya is the mother, Mahaprajapati Gautami is the aunt. Okay, so Maya's dream, there is this particular medallion in Barhut where Maya Devi is lying, and there is this elephant who is coming and touching the womb of Maya Devi. So when we look at Mahapurush, great men, often you'll find that they are not born due to typical biological process. It has been represented that way. There is a patriarchal idea behind it as well, that often there is this enemy of womb, that a woman has this capacity to procreate where men didn't have it. If any of you are interested in anthropology, there are various anthropological theories which have been given in this context, womb envy. Okay, now coming back here, we see that often in any religion, if you look at the birth of great men, it is due to a spiritual process. Even if I give you the example of, let's say, Ramayana, so birth of Ram, इफ यू लुक एट वाल्मीकि रामायण और रामचरित मानस, एक जगह खीर दे करके होता है, यज्ञ हो रहा है, उससे खीर आ रहा है, या उसका जो एप्पल का प्रसाद है, सेब का, उसको खा करके बर्थ होता है. सो इट इज कंसिडर्ड सेक्रेड व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट द बर्थ. इन बुद्धिज्म ऑल्सो और इवन इन जैनिज्म, व्हेन यू विल सी द बर्थ ऑफ महावीर, इट इज विद द टचिंग ऑफ वूम्ब बाय अ वाइट elephant. The elephant is white. White symbolizes purity. Okay, so the white elephant is touching the womb of Maya Devi and Buddha is being born. That is one way of representing Buddha's birth. Now here Buddha has nothing to do with it. Whether he is being represented in symbolic form or he is being represented in the human form or anthropomorphic form, the representation is going to remain the same. Maya's dream or Shal Bhanjika. This is one term which you should keep in mind. Shal Bhanjika. Shal क्या होता है? Branch of a tree. Bhanjika, that means breaking the branch of a tree. When we have to talk about production from earth, what do we do? If there is a particular let's say tree, हम क्या करते हैं? उसकी branches को तोड़ के we make a कलम. तो वो कलम को फिर हम दोबारा लगाते हैं. So when we are breaking the branch of a tree, it also represents the idea of reproduction, that we are going to sow it and from there you will see another tree coming up. So when in architecture, when in art history we represent birth, it is also represented with a shal bhanjika, that there will be a woman who is standing in Tribhanga pose and she is like this, she is breaking the branch of a tree. So Maya Devi has been represented as Shal Bhanjika, that also represents birth of Buddha. Okay, so that is one important event. Now when we talk about Mahabhinishkraman, so what they are going to show here? An empty horse. That Kanthak is coming back to the palace and Buddha is not there. This is how Mahabhinishkraman or leaving the palace, that event is going to be represented. Now coming back to Buddha achieving bodhi, knowledge, what is going to be the representation here? Are you familiar with the story of Buddha achieving nirvana? What is the story? Do you know what Mara Vijaya means? बताइए. See, we had used this term apasmar when we were talking about Chola bronzes and when we were discussing the image of Nataraj. So we talked about apasmar. The demon of illusion in Hinduism, Maya, जिससे मोह माया इंसान को होता है, and the person is not able to leave the worldly pleasures. In Buddhism, the term that is used is Mar. So when Buddha is meditating and Mar is realizing that Buddha is going to attain nirvana, will Mar be happy with it? वो तो वर्ल्डली प्लेजर्स का देवता या डीमन, जो भी कहना चाहे, पर्सपेक्टिव विल बी डिफरेंट फॉर डिफरेंट पीपल. ओके, सो ऑफ कोर्स मार इज नॉट गोइंग टू बी हैप्पी. So Mar is going to send an army of worldly pleasures towards Buddha to lure Buddha back into worldly pleasure. Then what Buddha is supposed to have done, Buddha is touching Mother Earth and he is saying that Mother Earth, you are the witness that I was not lured by Mara's army. And that is why Bhumi Sparsha Mudra becomes important. If we look at Buddha idols, it has become a fashion to decorate our homes with it now. We often don't pay a lot of attention to the mudras because they are telling us something. They have a specific meaning. So when we talk about Bhumi Sparsh Mudra, Buddha touching the earth, that represents the event of Buddha achieving knowledge. That represents the site of Bodh Gaya. Okay, so Bhumi Sparsh Mudra, this becomes important. Now let's say when we are representing Buddha in an anthropomorphic form, in human form, then we are going to show Buddha sitting there and touching earth. That will be Bhumi Sparsha Mudra, but that is going to come with Mahayana Buddhism. When we are talking about Hinayan or other branches of Buddhism, when it was not allowed to represent Buddha in anthropomorphic form or in human form, then what will be the representation? Symbol. Which symbol? Oh, horse is going to represent Mahavir Nishkraman. You will talk about birth with lotus. Here, Bodhi tree. When we are talking about symbol, if we have to represent, see, Buddha is going to be represented in the form of Bodhi tree, in the form of lotus, in the form of Buddha Pa, the footprints of Buddha, or in the form of a stoop as well, in the form of a chakra as well. All these things are going to represent Buddha, but which symbol represents which event? That is something that we should keep in mind. Okay, so when we are talking about representation of a Buddha in symbolic form, it is going to be Bodhi tree. In anthropomorphic form, it is going to be Bhumi Sparsha Mudra. This event is also known as Mar Vijaya. If there is this dash over it, that means we are going to pronounce this A as A. In pronunciation, people often have this problem कि हम A को भी A पढ़ देते हैं. अंग्रेजी में भी term वही है. It is a Sanskrit term or a Pali term that we are using here. So Mar is going to remain Mar. Mara नहीं होगा. ठीक है? This is not a problem. Pronunciation इतना चलता है, but I am just telling you that we should be a bit cautious about pronouncing Sanskrit terms or Pali terms as well wherever it is possible. Okay. Now coming back, Mara Vijaya represented as Bodhi tree in symbolic form, as Bhumi Sparsha Mudra when Buddha will be represented in anthropomorphic form. Is this clear? Another important event, another representation on stupas. If you remember it this way, it will become very easy for you to write mains answers. Prelims mein to aasan hoga hi, but in mains also you will find everything at one place. Okay. Now Buddha had achieved Nirvan. He has gotten Bodhi. Now he is going to preach. So the first sermon is going to become important. After that, he is going to give a plenty of sermons. What will be very important? The first sermon that he gave. Where did he give the first sermon? Sarnath in Mriga 1. So if you look at Sanchi Stoop, you will find that there is a chakra and a lot of deer have been represented. So they are making it clear that we are talking about the site of Sarnath. We are talking about the first sermon. So if we have to talk about the first sermon, what we are going to represent here? Chakra or wheel in English. Okay. Why chakra? Because Buddha is changing the wheel of law. If we talk about it, if we use the English translation, it is changing the wheel of law. Is law the exact translation of Sanskrit term dharma? No. It is not an exact translation. When we talk about the idea of dharma, in Indian context, the term Sanskrit term dharma has a very broad meaning. When we talk about the English term religion, that does not have such a broader meaning. It means religion that you have to follow. So it is talking about a particular sect, the philosophies that are associated with that. When we use the term dharma, in ancient Indian context, dharma can mean religion, dharma can mean one's lifestyle, dharma can mean law, dharma can mean duty, it can mean morality. So it had a very broader connotation when we are talking about ancient Indian philosophy. Now, when people started translating these ideas in English language, they could not find a suitable term for it, which would have defined the concept of dharma in its totality. So you will see that at various places, various translations have been used. At some place you will find the translation as duty, as religion, as law, as morality. All these translations have been used. None of the words are going to have the exact connotation of the term dharma. They are situational in nature. Is this clear? So here Buddha is changing the wheel of law. तो कैसे represent करेंगे? ऐसे, turning the wheel of law. Dharma chakra parivartan, the first sermon. So if we are talking about mudra, the mudra will be dharma chakra parivartan mudra. Okay, turning the wheel of law. When we talk about the symbolic representation, it is going to be with a chakra with a wheel. Is this clear? So if in UPSC it has been given symbols, events. Will you be able to match it? So wheel, the first sermon at Sarnath. Now what will happen? Buddha is going to go to various regions of, specifically of Eastern India. Buddha did not go to Deccan. Buddha did not go to North West. I had talked about this idea when we were discussing Mahajanpadas, that there was one question which was asked, which areas belong to the life of Buddha. So life of Buddha and Buddhism, they are two different things. When we talk about Buddhism, we are talking about the development of Buddhism throughout the centuries. When we are talking about the life of Buddha, that means we are talking specifically about a part of 6th century BCE and some decades of 5th century BCE. Okay, so from 563 BCE to 483 BCE, that is going to be the life of Buddha. So did Buddha go to Avanti? I had made you write this down as well, that Buddha was invited to Avanti but he could not go. Buddha is not going to North West. Now those areas will become important centers of Buddhism, but they were not related to life of Buddha. Buddha is not going to Deccan. Buddha is not going to South. Okay, so primarily if we look at the regions that Buddha is covering, prominently they are going to be parts of Eastern India. So Buddha is going to travel to various places and he is going to preach his sermon. What will happen eventually? In Kushinara, he is going to die. He is going to achieve Mahaparinirvana. Okay, now when he achieved Mahaparinirvana, how this is going to be represented? Stup. So there is this story. I don't remember whether I have talked about it in your class or not. I'll tell it anyway. So what is the story? There is this Chinese text from 11th century. Have we talked about it? Okay, so there is this Chinese text from 11th century which is talking about a conversation between Ananda, one of the favorite disciples of Buddha, and Buddha. So Ananda is asking Buddha, what should we do with the remains of a Tathagat when Tathagat dies? And Buddha said, according to an 11th century Chinese source, we are saying, it is how people perceived the conversation. It is not an exact recording of what Buddha and Ananda were talking. Okay, so Buddha is supposed to have said, according to that text, that you should bury the remains of the Tathagata, that is a Buddha, and then you should erect a stoop over it. And that is how you should venerate the remains of Tathagat. Now here, that story and similar stories in various Buddhist texts across the subcontinents and from various countries give us an insight that why the event of Mahaparinirvana is associated with the symbol of stupa. Okay. When we talk about Mahaparinirvana mudra, so when we are representing Buddha in symbolic form, stup is going to represent the event of Mahaparinirvana. When we are representing Buddha in anthropomorphic or human form, Mahaparinirvana mudra is going to become important. What is the Mahaparinirvana mudra? Lying Buddha. That Buddha is lying on one side, and then Mahaparinirvana mudra. So Buddha will be lying, and there will be some disciples who are going to be mourning. So they are, one of them is, as far as I remember it, one of them is keeping the hands like this. That means mourning. They are crying. Okay, so they are in the mourning position. Lying Buddha, that is going to represent the Mahaparinirvana mudra. Now, various cultures, when Buddhism is going to spread in various other areas of the world, various cultures are going to interpret these symbols in their own ways. For example, if you have been to a Japanese Buddhist temple, have any of you been to any Japanese Buddhist temple? Not in Japan, in India also we have various temples constructed by Japanese people dedicated to Buddhism. If you go to a Japanese Buddhist temple, there you will find the lying Buddha. That is Mahaparinirvana mudra. So Japanese believe that Buddha is in deep sleep. He has not died. He will come back for us. So they keep beating the drum all the time. So there is this, if you go to the center, there will be the image of lying Buddha in Mahaparinirvana mudra, and on both the sides they will be beating drums, so that they can wake up Buddha from his deep sleep. So this is also a very interesting thing. When we look at Buddhist philosophy, when we look at Buddhist ideas, it remained very flexible. Wherever it is going, wherever it is reaching, people are adapting Buddhism in their own ways. What Buddha said and how people might be practicing it at a later time might have contradictions. For example, if you go to a Chinese Buddhist temple, you will see some people offering wine to Buddha. Now, that is very contradictory to Buddhism. Buddha is questioning all these behaviors, and you see subverting the very idea there. Okay, so people have adapted Buddhism in their own ways, and over time the Buddhist philosophy has evolved. What Buddha said and how it evolved might be different. We are going to see some of the differences, and UPSC has asked questions on those differences as well. I hope this much is clear. So here you know about the important events, how they have been represented, what are the terms which are used, and what are the important sites. Remember this particular detail. It will be helpful for you in writing mains answer as well as in answering prelims questions. Okay. Chalo, let us move forward now. When we talk about the philosophy of Buddhism, what is Buddha going to preach? What are the philosophies that Buddha is going to talk about? Four Noble Truth. We can take a break and then we can talk about it, because it is going to be a long discussion. Okay. So it's better that we don't break it. Okay. So till now we had discussed the causes for rise of Buddhism, and that will be similar for Jainism as well. That is something that we had discussed. We had discussed the important events in the life of Buddha and how it has been represented in architecture, be it in symbolic form or be it in the form, in anthropomorphic form, where Buddha has been represented in human form. We also understood the important terminologies which are associated with the important events. Now what we are going to do, we are going to understand the basic philosophy of Buddhism. Now when we talk about the philosophy of Buddhism, what Buddha is teaching, what do you remember? Okay, so he is talking about 4 noble truths. He is talking about 4 noble truths. And what are those noble truths? He is saying that the world is full of sorrow. It's a very basic thing that he is saying. All of us experience sorrow in our lives. He is not saying something which is very extraordinary. People are going to relate to him that everyone experiences sorrow and it is part of our lives. So he is saying that this is the first noble truth. He is saying that there is sorrow due to a particular reason. Why there is sorrow? Because we desire too much. So he is using the word Trishna for that. Trishna, which can be translated as desire. And for this, a particular term that is used is samudaya. Okay, what is a samudaya? The desire due to which sorrow is present in our lives. So he is saying that there is sorrow in the world, but for that sorrow there is a reason, that is Trishna, that is our worldly desires. Board is not visible. स्टूडेंट्स ने किसी ने लिखा है नो डिस्प्ले ऑफ टीचर बोर्ड इज नॉट विजिबल. एक बार देख लीजिएगा टेक्निकलिटी. ओके ओके हाँ ओके ओके ठीक है हाँ. सो the second noble truth he is saying that this sorrow is due to our desires, that is Trishna, also known as samudaya. Okay, then what is he saying? Okay, there is sorrow, there is a reason for that sorrow, but sorrow can be ended. Okay, and what is that? He is saying that there is this end to sorrow, that is Nirodha. Okay, how can we end our desires? It can be ended. That is the third noble truth. How can we end it? By following the Ashtangik Marg, 8-fold path. So that is going to be the next noble truth, Ashtangik Marg or 8-fold path. So he is saying by following the 8-fold path, we can have an end to our sorrow. Now, if you look at these 4 noble truths, he is not talking about deep philosophical ideas here. He is talking about very simple things that people experience. He is talking about something which everyone, irrespective of their identity, will relate to. Okay, so it is something which is going to be appealing to the masses. They might not be interested into the questions of how the universe is created and how all of us are formed and what is going to happen to us after we die. They might not be interested in that, not at least not everyone. But the ideas that Buddha is teaching, they are very simple and they are going to be appealing to the masses. All of us would want to end our sorrow. This is something which will be appealing to people. Okay, and there also when he is offering a solution, that solution in itself is very simple. He is saying 8-fold path. If you remember, again UPSC does not ask you to name all the 8-fold paths, but if we do an analysis of it, what he is saying, our speech should be right. Right intention, right speech, right view, right actions, right livelihood, right concentration, right mindfulness. When you look at all these ideas, what is he saying? That when you are looking at somebody, look with the right intention. When you are doing something, you should have a right intention. When you are adapting a means of livelihood, it should be a right means of livelihood. That means you are not stealing someone's money. You are not engaging in corruption. You are not killing anyone. So that attack will be on hunters because their livelihood depends upon hunting. The question will be on thieves because thieves or dacoits, their livelihood is by looting people, by stealing from people. So when he is questioning these livelihoods, that is also not there is not a very large number of population that is engaged in that. Buddha is not saying that you should not practice trade. He is not saying that you should not practice agriculture. He is very practical here. He is questioning a particular livelihood which is attached to stealing or which is attached to violence, and there is a limited number of people who are adapting that means of livelihood. Okay, so when we are looking at these philosophies, he is very simply saying that we should live our lives peacefully and we should let others live as well by not harming them, by not doing violence on them. It's a very simple idea that he preaches. Additionally, what else he says? He gives 5 precepts of life. Again, moral ideas. He is saying that you should speak the truth. You should not tell a lie. He is saying that you should not steal. You should not do sexual misconduct. You should not engage in violence. These are the ideas that he is teaching. If we just look at the conclusion, they are all moral ideas which any person will learn in their family as well. In general, people don't teach their children to tell a lie. They don't ask them to go commit violence on somebody. So these are the moral ideas which are anyway ingrained in people, irrespective of their religious identity. So when we are looking at Buddhist ideas, they are simple, they are moral in nature, they are not talking about deep philosophies. So when we look at the teachings of Buddha, he is offering a solution to the problems of that time, and at the same time he is keeping those solutions very simple. Okay, he is offering people the idea of madhyam marg, that is middle path. So what is the middle path? He is asking people not to engage in excessive luxury and at the same time to not perform extreme penance. He is saying that you should follow the middle path, neither indulging in excessive luxury nor engaging in extreme penance. So again, this is something that people will find more appealing. And if you look at Buddha, he is also following middle path in various other arenas. For example, if we say that Buddhist philosophy preaches non-violence, there the difference between Buddhism and Jainism lies. When we talk about the idea of non-violence, see, we talked about the problems: violence, exclusivity, and costly nature, and then we talked about complex nature of religion. We talked about Buddhism talking about non-violence. We talked about it being a very simple affair and talking about very simple ideas. We'll come to the aspect of inclusivity in a while. Now, when we are talking about non-violence, Buddhism and Jainism, both the religions are going to put a focus on non-violence. Buddhism remained very practical when it is talking about practicing non-violence. Jainism goes to another extreme. What kind of extreme are we talking about here? When we are talking about Jainism, Jainism is saying that even the things that are considered non-living by other philosophies, those things also have a soul. For example, Jainism is saying that in soil, in air, in water, everywhere soul is present. So what Jainism does? Jainism questions the idea of practicing agriculture as well. Jainism says that a Jain follower should not practice agriculture. Why? Because by doing that also you are doing violence to the mother earth. You are harming smaller insects which might be present in the soil. If you look at a Jain monk or nun, they often walk with a broom and they keep using that broom wherever they are walking. Why? So that they don't harm even a smaller insect. So when we talk about the idea of non-violence, where Buddhism remained practical, Jainism is going into the extremes. Jainism, see, think about it, in a particular geographical space where agriculture is the principal method of livelihood for people. Our philosophy is banning the practice of agriculture for its followers. So no matter how much appealing the philosophy might be, it is cutting upon a very large base to be its follower. And that is something that you will see being true even today. If you look at Jain people, often they are engaged in trade. Why? Because trade is one profession that Jainism allowed. Okay, so here if questions on difference is coming, this is one arena where Buddhism and Jainism differs from each other, even though they put both the religions, both the philosophies are emphasizing upon the idea of non-violence. The extent to which non-violence should be practiced, that is something which is different. Is this clear? So remember this. Now when we talk about Buddha and when we talk about middle path, here also Buddha seems to be very practical. How? If you look at Buddha, he is having good relations with Ajatashatru, who killed his own father. So when we are looking at these philosophers, they are also accepting that political violence is part of political life. Ajatashatru is a follower of Buddhism. Buddha kept meeting him at various occasions. So be it Mahavir or be it Buddha, both of them had good relations with political kings, and those kings were also engaged in political violence. So here we see that practicality as well. When we talk about the idea of inclusivity, so here we see Sangha. So when we talk about Sangha, who is allowed the entry into Sangha? So earlier only men were allowed. Okay. Later what is going to happen? In the lifetime of Buddha itself, women would also want to be a part of Sangha. So when we talk about Sangha, monks and nuns. When we talk about monks, the term that we use, the Pali term is bhikkhu, and the Pali term for nun is bhikkhuni. So bhikkhu or bhikshu, as we call it in Sanskrit, bhikshu or bhikkhu, or another term thera. Here we use the term bhikkhuni or theri. Okay, so these are the terms which are associated with it. Now women also wanted to be a part of Sangha. They wanted to be bhikkhunis or theris. Buddha was very reluctant about allowing women the entry into Sangha. And there we find this, again, the story of conversation between Ananda and Buddha, and it is Ananda who persuaded Buddha to allow women's entry in Sangha. And Buddha is supposed to have said that Buddhism would have lasted for 1,000 years. Now that women have entered Sangha, it is going to last only for 500 years. So when you look at a particular philosophy, it might be revolutionary according to that time. If you look at the entry of women in Sangha, it is of course revolutionary considering that time period. But we cannot judge it with modern day parameters. If we talk about the idea of equality, that is something which will not be present in past. It is a very modern idea of equality, of modernity, of humanity. So these ideas are relatively new ideas. If we look at the past, we need to look at the presence of relative equality. If you do a comparative analysis with various religions, you will see that here women experienced relative equality, not the complete equality. So women were allowed the entry into Sangha, but reluctantly. Is this clear? So that shows us the idea of inclusivity. Now, are the rules going to be same for nuns and monks? No. If you go by the rules, there is this particular rule there that, let's say, if there is a bhikkhuni who is a bhikkhuni for 80 years and there is a bhikkhu who has become a bhikkhu today, then also the bhikkhu will have a higher status in comparison to the bhikkhuni. So these, if you look at the rules, they are not the same. What are we experiencing? We experiencing the entry into Sangha. That is something which is different here. If you look at the Buddhist texts, the earlier texts, it also said that a woman cannot achieve nirvana by being a woman. For a woman to achieve nirvana, they should do right karma, and in the next life, they can be reborn as a man, and then they can achieve nirvana. So all these things are also present there. When we are talking about entry, does it mean equal rights, equal treatment? No. It is telling us about the participation, not equality. Relative equality is a term that we can use. Is this clear? Now I use the term reincarnation. That means Buddhism does believe in the idea of rebirth. Okay, so it does talk about the cycle of birth and death. Now this is the knowledge which we can apply if there is a statement that Buddhism does not believe in rebirth. So we know that Buddhism did believe in rebirth. We talk about various lives of a Buddha as well. So by logic, Buddhism did believe in the idea of rebirth, in the idea of reincarnation. Is this clear? So here that is one thing. Second, when we talk about the entry of people in Sangha, people belonging to different varna, different caste identity, people who are outside of the fold of varna system, they were also welcomed. For example, if we talk about people outside the fold, we see Yaksha, Yakshini, Nag, Nagin coming into the fold of Buddhism. So these people who might have been tribal people, who were forest dwellers, they are also allowed the entry into Sangha. So the very idea of inclusivity is present here, questioning the aspect of exclusivity which people did not like. Is this clear? So we should keep these things in mind. Buddhism is offering solutions to the problem of the contemporary time that we are studying. Now, if let's say there is a slave, because we have talked about the presence of domestic slavery in Indian subcontinent. When we were talking about Mauryan period, we talked about it at length, how Megasthenes is saying that that slavery did not prevail in India. But when we look at the 13th major rock edict of Ashok, he is asking people to treat their slaves in a good manner. When we look at Arthashastra, it is giving us various rules pertaining to slavery. Okay, so we do know slavery did exist. Now, if we talk about Buddha's perspective on slavery, did he question the institution of slavery? No. See, here again the practicality is very much visible. When we look at a particular philosopher, the ideas might be revolutionary in one context, but it cannot be completely revolutionary the way we understand it. Our morality, it is not the case that our morality will be present in that time's morality. When we look at the institution of morality, when we look at the institution of slavery, Buddha did not question the institution of slavery. Buddha says that a slave can join the Sangha if the slave has permission from the master. So he is also maintaining the status quo. He is not questioning the status quo. So that is a practicality. That is where the idea of middle path comes in. It is not only present in the lifestyle, but it is also present in the way Buddha is propagating his ideas. Buddha is also saying, if let's say there is a soldier, Buddha is saying that a soldier has to acquire permission from the ruler. Then the soldier can join the Sangha. So he remains very practical in allowing entry to people in the Sangha. Even when he is inclusive, he is not questioning the status quo. Is this clear? To some extent, he is questioning that by allowing women. But wherever it might have caused bigger disturbances, he is remaining practical. So the idea of inclusivity and what else comes with that, that is something that we need to keep in mind. Is this clear? Now, if we look at some of the questions, does Buddha talk about God? No. Buddha did not deal with this question. Buddha said that I don't want to waste my time into going into these kind of debates. So he is neither accepting the idea nor denying the idea. He is simply saying that I don't want to talk about it. What is he talking about? He is talking about the importance of karma. Okay, so he is attributing everything to karma, not to niyati or destiny, the way Ajivaks were doing. So he is emphasizing upon the importance of karma. That is similar in the context of Jainism. Buddhism and Jainism, both the philosophies put a lot of focus, emphasis upon the importance of karma. With which philosophy they are differing here? Ajivika. We talked about it some time ago, that Ajivikas are saying that everything is in the hands of destiny. So there is a difference with one particular philosophy, there is a similarity with Jainism. When we talk about the idea of rebirth, does Buddhism believe in it? Yes, Buddhism believes in the idea of rebirth. That we see when Buddhism talks about women being reborn as men if they do good karma, and then they can achieve liberation, and we see it in Buddha being reborn again as well. So the idea of rebirth is present in Buddhism. What is the attitude of Buddhism towards Vedas? Buddhism is questioning the authority of Vedas, because Vedas are saying that they are the authoritative voice when it comes to dictating people how to live. Buddhism is saying that Vedas are not the authority. So Buddha is questioning the authority of Veda. Buddha is questioning the dominance of Sanskrit language. So at both the parts he is posing a question. This is something that Jainism will also do, questioning the authority of Veda and questioning the dominance of Sanskrit language. Is this clear? So here is where the similarity lies. If we talk about the differences, excessive focus upon non-violence, वहाँ पे difference है. Is this clear? So this is the basic philosophy. We'll go into the larger philosophies as well. Basic philosophy is 4 noble truths, 8-fold path, and 5 precepts that we discussed. The ideas that we discussed here, ideas of rebirth, view on God, view on soul, violence, who is allowed entry in Sangha, who is not, what are the rules, they are part of advanced philosophy that UPSC asks questions from. So I hope this is clear. We'll talk about other ideas as well in a while. Now let us understand when Buddha is preaching these ideas. See, Buddha is preaching all these ideas. Over time, with Buddhism, you will find that the nature is evolutionary. There are a lot of different things that are being included in Buddhism. We'll talk about it after some time when we have discussed the reasons for success. Yes. What are we discussing here? Let us focus on that. There is no time for unnecessary remarks when you have joined the class late. You have come 2 hours late, so please don't disturb the pace of the class. Buddhism believes in the idea of rebirth. Okay, yes, this is what we are discussing here. Please do not disturb the pace of the class when you are not present. I have said this time and again to you. Be present in the class on time, listen to what we are teaching here. We are here to help you with the exam, not deal with unnecessary remarks. Okay, now let us talk about it. So we have discussed the ideas of Buddhism. Now wherever there is a difference, we'll talk about it. Okay, otherwise we should understand that these are the ideas which are part of Buddhism. Now if we talk about the reasons for the success of Buddhism, what would be the reasons for success of Buddhism? Why Buddhism succeeded? So questioning the complexities which were present in the ritualistic aspect. Okay, Buddhism is preaching the simple way of life. Simple thing, if we have to say it in one line, Buddhism is offering solution to contemporary problems. Okay, that is one way in which we can explain the success of Buddhism. So here focus on non-violence. We discussed it in the starting of the topic itself, that violence was one problem that people were grappling with. What Buddhism is doing? Buddhism is preaching the idea of non-violence. That is one reason for being successful. What else Buddhism is doing? Again, another problem that we had discussed, the problem of exclusivity. So Buddhism is offering inclusivity to people belonging to different varna, different caste, different gender identity, people belonging to non-Aryan identities. So all these identities are welcome into the fold of Buddhism. They can be a part of Sangha. Wherever there is something that we need to understand, that we have already discussed in the case of women, in the case of soldiers, in the case of slaves, what are the conditions attached that we have seen. Irrespective of those conditions, what remains common is that these identities were offered entry into Sangha. So inclusivity is another point which becomes very important here, which is another reason of success. We talked about Buddhism not being costly for people. Again, another reason. That was another problem that we had discussed. Unnecessary rituals which were very costly for people. So that is again another reason for success. We talked about complexity in ritualistic aspect. Here Buddhism is teaching very simple ideas which are related to one's lifestyle. So ideas of morality, questions which are dealing with simple lifestyle issues. That is another reason. Simple philosophy is something that we should keep in mind. What else is the reason for success and spread of Buddhism? See, there can be a very simple idea, but if the preacher is not good at communication, that simple idea can sound very difficult. If the preacher is good at delivering that idea, very complex ideas can be understood in a very simplistic manner. So, what is the medium of preaching that matters? What is the way of preaching that also matters? So, apart from the philosophy, the personality of Buddha, the language in which Buddha was preaching the people, the way of preaching, all these things become important here. So Buddha had a very charismatic personality. I told you that story of the woman whose child had died. So he had a very simple, very practical way of explaining things to people. He is teaching people in Pali language. He is not using the language Sanskrit. So when we are looking at the way in which he is preaching, when we look at the content in which he is preaching and the medium in which he is preaching, all those things are going to contribute not only to the success of Buddhism but also to the spread of Buddhism. Okay, there are various stories through which Buddhism is spreading. For example, we talked about one story. There are multiple stories. So there is one story which is associated with other great personalities as well. It is an anecdote where when Buddha was traveling, there were a few people who were constantly abusing Buddha. So the followers are saying, why aren't you responding to them? He simply asked them, if somebody is giving you something and you are not taking it, what will happen? So the thing remains with the giver. So he said, that's what I am doing. So it's a very simple way of explaining things. There are various stories that are going to be propagated. You might have heard of the story of Angulimal. So Angulimal is a dacoit. What he used to do, he used to rob people, then he used to cut their fingers and he used to make a garland out of it and he used to wear it. That is why Angulimal, Anguliyon ki mala pehenne wala. So it is telling us how cruel that person was. And when he met Buddha, and when he was taught by Buddha, he converted to Buddhism, he became a Buddhist, he started practicing non-violence. So these kind of stories also contributed to the success and spread of Buddhism, where it was shown how powerful the philosophy of Buddhism is, how powerful the ideas of non-violence are. And these kind of stories you'll keep finding in various texts. When we were discussing Ashwaghosh, I told you the content of Saundaranandan. That was a text written by him, that it is a story of Buddha's half-brother, that how he was very cruel and he is ultimately going and adapting the path of non-violence. So these kind of anecdotes, these kind of stories, they are also creating an imprint into minds of people. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, then the language becomes important, and it is true in the case of Jainism as well. When we talk about Buddhism, Buddhism also questions the dominance of Sanskrit language. Buddha started teaching in Pali language. When we talk about Jainism, Jainism chose to teach in Prakrit. Okay, so Jainism also questioned the dominance of Sanskrit language. So that is also going to appeal to the masses when we are talking about the medium in which these people are preaching. Now, if you look at the problems in the later times, Buddhism will adapt Sanskrit. So the reason for the success, when it is reversed, that will also become the reason for the decline. Okay, because they are questioning the dominance, and later from Kushan period onwards, you will see that Ashwagosha is writing the biography of Buddha in Sanskrit language. Okay, so Buddha Charita, we have already talked about that. So we should keep these things in mind. If you reverse these ideas, they are going to lead to decline as well. Is this clear? Now, if we talk about patronage, दोनों अलग अलग भाषाएं हैं. हाँ, जैसे संस्कृत और हिंदी में फर्क है ना, दोनों अलग अलग भाषाएं हैं, वैसे ही पाली और प्राकृत भी अलग अलग भाषाएं हैं. ठीक, अब क्या बात कर रहे थे हम? Patronage. So we were talking about the patronage. Now, when we talk about Buddhism, Buddhism received constant patronage both from royalty as well as common people. Okay, here also there will be a difference when we'll compare it to Jainism. When we talk about Buddhism, it is going to receive patronage over time by royalty as well as by common people. When we talk about Jainism, Jainism will also receive patronage by common people as well as royalty, but the patronage was not constant. When we talk about Jainism, there are a few rulers. For example, we have talked about Kharvel. I had given you the reference of Kharvel, Hathi Gumfa inscription. When we talk about Buddhism, we have a series of rulers. We talked about Ajatashatru, we talked about Kalashok, we talked about Ashok, we talked about Kanishka, we talked about Pala rulers. So over time, these are examples where we see that Buddhism did receive constant patronage of rulers. And at the same time, I had talked about the stoop of Barhut, if you remember, when we were discussing Shungas. Then I told you that when Pushyamitra Shunga is not providing patronage to Buddhism, and there is this recorded reference in Buddhist texts that Pushyamitra Shunga had destroyed these stupas which were constructed by Ashok. Even during that time, we see coming of Barhut Stoop, and how Barhut Stoop is being made or how Sanchi Stoop is being built. A major patronage is coming from people. We had talked about Sanchi Stoop in this context as well, that when we look at Sanchi Stoop, half of the inscriptions are by women. So we see people belonging to different classes, people belonging to Vaishya Varna particularly. You will see crafts people, you will see traders, you will see women belonging to upper Varna. Wherever people have accumulated wealth, those sections did contribute to the growth of Buddhism. So even if royal patronage is absent at a particular point of time, people are giving patronage. So patronage pattern, constant patronage by various classes will also contribute to the growth of Buddhism. Is this clear? So all these reasons taken together can become our reasons for success and spread. We see various rulers putting a lot of effort. For example, we see Ashok, who sent missionaries in various areas. We had talked about Ashok, how he is saying that I am a Buddhist person and he is visiting the important places in the life of Buddha. We talked about Rumindei pillar in that context, that he is going there and he is inscribing it that I am asking people not to pay certain taxes because they belong to the land of birthplace of Shakyamuni Buddha. We talked about him sending his own son and daughter to Sri Lanka and converting the ruler Tissa there to Buddhism. So we have seen efforts on part of rulers. The same is can be attributed to Kanishka, the same can be attributed to Pala rulers. There have been series of rulers who have contributed to the spread of Buddhism, not only in Indian subcontinent but outside of Indian subcontinent as well. So that is also one reason for success that we should keep in mind. Apart from that, when they are patronizing, there is growth of literature, there is growth of architecture. All these things are going to be a contributing factor. There are rulers who are establishing universities, who are giving donations to the universities where Buddhist philosophy is major part of the curriculum. So when we are looking at the reasons, they are multifaceted. There is not a single reason. There are multiple reasons why Buddhism flourished and eventually was spread even outside of the boundaries of Indian subcontinent. ठीक है, clear है ये चीज? Here, wherever we have talked about the similarities and differences with other religious philosophies, keep that in mind. Because UPSC has not asked these kind of questions that what are the reasons for success and A, B, C, D. This is not what has been asked. It's a very simple question. It can be asked. अगर पूछ लिया तो आपके पास already content है. But if you look at the pattern, in the pattern, these simple kind of questions have not been asked. Okay, so this is one thing, but the focus should be on the similarities on and differences with Jainism. That is one arena from where UPSC has asked questions. Okay. Now, if we are talking about a particular religion being so successful and receiving patronage of so many rulers and common people as well, why do we not find so many Buddhist people in present times in Indian subcontinent? If you look at Buddhism, it more or less disappeared from the place of its own origin. If you go to, let's say, Bodh Gaya, if you go to Kushinagar, if you go to Sarnath, if you go to Lumbini, you will not find so many Buddhist people as we would expect to find. So, what are the reasons for the decline of Buddhism when it did remain relevant for so many centuries? It did receive patronage regularly for so many centuries. What were the reasons for decline? Okay, so here adaptation of the language, which dominance they were questioning. So if we look at Buddhism, see, we can understand it in two ways. Internal factors and external factors. Okay, why Buddhism became successful? If Buddhism leaves all those things and it starts adapting the malice that it was questioning, it is going to eventually decline. It was questioning the problematic aspects of Vedic religion. If Vedic religion start reforming itself, why people will adapt Buddhism? They are finding an alternative which is offering them solution to their problems. What if Hinduism started offering that alternative? People are going to start adapting Hinduism. Okay, so there are two kinds of factors. One will be internal and second will be external. If we talk about the internal factors, so there we will see that Buddhism started practicing some of the problematic things that it was questioning. For example, in Buddhism, we see earlier we were seeing that how people of the Sangha were advised to receive very minimal alms. Now, if we look at the archaeological excavations of various places like Bhaja, like Karla, we find there gold coins. So we see that these monks, these nuns had also started accepting expensive gifts. So that is one problem. We see that these people are not following the rules that were ascribed to them. We had talked about Ashokan inscription at Sanchi, minor pillar inscription, and in that I told you how Ashok is asking the people of Sangha to follow the rules of Sangha properly, and if they are not going to do it, he had the right to punish them. So if such an inscription is recorded, that means people are not following, people of Sangha were not following the rules the way they had to. So gradually there were problems. Buddhism was questioning the dominance of Sanskrit language. Eventually we see that it started writing in Sanskrit language itself. We see Ashwaghosh writing the biography of Buddha, Buddhacharit, in Sanskrit language. We see a very prominent philosopher, Nagarjuna, writing Pragya Paramita Sutra in Sanskrit language. So there are various scholars who are going to leave Pali, who are going to start writing in Sanskrit. That will be another problem. We will see that earlier they were questioning the idea of divinity, the idea of worship. They were putting a lot of questions on these things. Gradually what they started doing, they started making the idols of Buddha and they started worshipping Buddha as a God. Buddha was a philosopher who was preaching his philosophy, but gradually people will start preaching Buddha as a God. So again, problems are creeping in. They were questioning the presence of an intermediary or importance of an intermediary. We'll talk about this idea in a while. In Buddhism, they started preaching the concept of bodhisattva. Again, bodhisattva is also a kind of intermediary. So there are various ideas which Buddhism was preaching. Buddhism was questioning the problems present in that time, but gradually these problems started creeping in within the fold of Buddhism. So that is going to become a problem. What else we see? That when these kind of problems are creeping in, people are going to have differences with each other. Some people will say that Buddha said this, not that. The other group is going to say, no, no, you are wrong, Buddha did not say this. So people are going to interpret the ideas, the philosophy, the teachings of Buddha in their own way. And then there is bound to be differences. And when there will be differences, there are going to be various sects. If you remember when we were talking about Wensang, I specifically mentioned this, that Wensang writes that there are as many as 18 sects present in India when we are talking about Buddhism, and Mahayana Buddhism was the most prominent one. So this is what Wensang had written. So we do know that there were various sects of Buddhism and they'll differ from each other, and that is why the philosophy is also going to not be appealing to as many people as it was. We see another change in patronage pattern. After Pala rulers, we don't come across big dynasties which are patronizing Buddhism. So patronage from royalty also ended. Problems were also there. In that line, in that context, let us understand the changes that Hinduism was witnessing. We have talked about Gupta period and the religious changes that had come. During Gupta period, we talked about it, how women, Shudra, non-Aryan people, they were given the right to listen to Puranas. They were given the right to have Vrat and Upavasa. That is the change which is coming. We talked about the importance of bhakti. We talked about the importance of personal relationship between Nar and Narayan when we were discussing Gupta period, that there was an emphasis on the personal relationship between Nar and Narayan. Again, they were questioning the role of intermediary. They are saying that you don't need an intermediary to connect with your God. You can have a personalized relationship, and in this context, the image of Krishna becomes very important. If you look at Krishna, Krishna is a God who was a friend to the devotee, who was a guide to the devotee when needed, who had worked as a charioteer when the devotee needed. The very personalized relationship of Krishna and Arjun, the personalized relationship of Krishna with the gopis, Sudama. When we are talking about these gods, they are taking the center stage, and there we see the importance of bhakti coming in Hinduism. And this is something which is happening in North India. We'll talk about Bhakti movement. That is a separate topic where we'll discuss in various parts of Indian subcontinent. We see the idea of Bhakti becoming important, where they were questioning the importance of intermediary, and they were emphasizing upon this very idea of personal relationship between God and the devotee. So when we are looking at Hinduism, it is reforming itself. When we are looking at Buddhism, it is undergoing the changes which it was questioning earlier. So people do have an alternative. We see a figure, we'll talk about Shankaracharya in Bhakti movement. We see a figure like Shankaracharya who is going to various places and defeating Buddhist monks, nuns and other religious gurus in various debates that were taking place. So there are individuals who are putting in a lot of efforts in revival of Hinduism by this time. So when we are reaching 6th century, 7th century, we see a revival of Hinduism. So the patronage that was going to Buddhism by common people, that will also gradually decline, because they will be more attracted towards a reform religion rather than being attracted towards a religion which was reformist at first but had acquired problematic tenets. Okay, so we need to look at it from both the aspects. On top of that, we see a person like Bakhtiyar Khilji. So the important educational centers were left. And when Bakhtiyar Khilji is coming, he is attacking those institutions. He is setting Nalanda and Vikramshila universities on fire, where they kept burning for months, and important manuscripts are being burnt. The nuns and monks are taking some of the manuscripts and running towards Tibet. So we see the destruction of important universities as well, which could have been an important center of dissemination of Buddhist philosophy. So on all the aspects, we see that decline was on the way. And it was not a sudden decline, it was a gradual decline. Is this clear? So this is something that we should understand. Okay, so we have understood the causes why Buddhism is coming into existence. We understood some of the philosophical tenets. We understood the reasons for success of Buddhism. We understood that is going to be the reasons for spread as well. We understood the reasons of decline. Okay, that is something that we have covered. We have looked at some of the important terminology, some of the important sites. If you look at the gradual discussion that we have had of ancient Indian history, you will come across dynasties, their support for Buddhism, what kind of Buddhist literature was present, in which areas Buddhist architecture was being built. All those things we have covered. That is something that you need to keep in mind while studying Buddhism. Now, let us talk about some other ideas that we should know about. Okay. Now, see, what will start happening? That Buddhism will gradually spread to various regions. Now, when Buddhism will spread to various regions, there are going to be people with different kind of problems. Buddhism arose in a particular time period, and it was an answer to a particular set of problems. Now, when it is spreading to various areas, the problems might not be the same. People might not be influenced by similar kind of ideas. There might be a difference. Gradually, there will be various questions that will also arise. When Buddhism is spreading to different areas, there will be different kind of ritualistic practices that might be part of people's lifestyle. So it had two options, either to evolve the philosophy in a different manner or to die down. Buddhism chose to evolve the philosophy according to the needs of people, and there we see gradual changes as well, and that is where differences will also arise. Okay, so one such concept is of Bodhisattva. Who is a Bodhisattva? Okay, a person who will help others to get enlightenment. So that means that person is an intermediary. Okay, so here that is where you see the evolution. Okay, so what we know about the Bodhisattvas are people who are capable of attaining enlightenment on their own, but they are holding their nirvana to help other people out. Okay, so people capable of attaining nirvana, but they are not holding nirvana. They are holding their nirvana. They are helping other people reach that stage. There is this very beautiful medallion in Barhut in Madhya Pradesh. There was this stupa. It is now mostly found in various museums because it was not protected the way it should have been. So there is this medallion, and on that medallion, the foundation classes I show that medallion. I'll just give you an idea. So what is happening? There is this medallion, and there is a tree here, and on that tree there are a lot of fruits. There is this river, and there is another tree here. So what happens? This is known as Kapi Jatak. So what happens that on this particular tree, a lot of monkeys were living, and Buddha monkey, Buddha Kapi, he was their leader. Okay, so it is the story of a previous birth of Buddha when he was a kapi, when he was a monkey. What happens? The ruler had the desire to eat the fruits of that particular tree. He sends a hunter and he says that kill those monkeys so that I can acquire the fruits from that particular tree. Okay, very beautifully, if you look at the river, here they have shown fish as well to denote, because in art, the representation is telling you the whole story. It is not written here. So we know that this is a river. Now the hunter has come here. The hunter is going to kill the monkeys. So what Kapi Buddha does, he forms a bridge out of his own body. He is forming that bridge, and other monkeys are using the body of Buddha to reach to the other tree, which is here. Okay, so he formed the bridge out of his own body. He could have gone, but he did not go. He is helping other monkeys reach that particular tree, okay, which is safe for them. Now, seeing that, if you have heard, if you have read books of stories when you were children, there used to be a particular story of Siddhartha and Devadatta. Siddhartha Buddha, Devadatta used to be evil cousin. So every time he used to be very jealous of Siddhartha, and he used to kill one animal or bird, and then Siddhartha used to go and protect that bird or animal. So here also you will find similar kind of trope. The Devadatta monkey, the evil monkey who is jealous of Buddha, he thinks that this is the best time to attack him. So he jumps on the back so that Kapi Buddha drowns in the river. Now, looking at the sacrifice that Kapi Buddha was making, the hunter asks his friends to spread a sheet so that Kapi Buddha falls on that sheet and he does not get harm or died. So this story also tells you about the transformative capacity of compassion, that there was this individual who is so compassionate that he is helping others to be safe first, and it is triggering a very positive response in a hunter whose livelihood is based upon violence, that he is saving the person whom he should have hunted. So it also tells you about the transformative capacity of Buddhism. And then the hunter goes to the ruler and he asks them to come and take the lessons of how to rule, how moral a king should be from Kapi Buddha. And then here they have shown two of them sitting together, and Kapi Buddha is preaching the human king how to be a good ruler. So if we look at this particular story here itself, because Jataks are being composed after the death of Buddha. Okay, so when Jatak, this kind of question will arise in the minds of people. If Buddha was so compassionate, why did he leave everyone? Then the answer will be, he did not leave. He keeps coming back. So there has been various births of Buddha, and Buddha will come again. So the idea of future Buddha or Bodhisattva, if you have seen the laughing Buddha, that is one representation of the future Buddha. Okay, Maitreya Buddha as we call them. So there has been this idea that Buddha will come back as Maitreya Buddha. Okay, so these kind of stories are part of literary tradition. These kind of stories are found on various stupa walls. This is the representation that is on Barhut wall. The similar representation you will find on Sanchi stupa wall and various other stupas. You will find these kind of representations. What is it telling us? It is telling us about the idea of Bodhisattva. Who is a Bodhisattva? A human being or a being who is capable of achieving nirvana but holds it to help other people out. Is this clear? So by this very simple story, you can understand another philosophical aspect of Buddhism. You can understand how literary tradition has adapted this idea. You can understand how in architecture this idea has been represented. Literary and architectural aspect becomes more important in your mains examination. In prelims examination, the idea of Bodhisattva becomes important. Is this clear? Now there is another term which has been used. The term is paramita. Paramitas represent the qualities that a being should have that will define who is a bodhisattva. So for example, the idea, the compassion will be one paramita. Because if you are not compassionate, why would you hold your own nirvana and help other people out? The person should be compassionate. The person should be patient. Other people might do some irritating things as well. The person should not get angry. So these are the qualities that a bodhisattva should have. And for denoting those qualities, the term paramita have been used. Is this clear? So you understood the concept of bodhisattva and the meaning of the term paramita. Now there are various bodhisattvas. They have been represented in sculptural form. They have been represented in various paintings as well. So we can stop here and we can talk about those details in the next class. The concept of bodhisattva, the various Buddhist councils that we kept referring to when we were doing ancient India, some of the literature, architecture, we will talk about it in the next class. And we will talk about Jainism and other philosophical ideas. So maybe we will move on to bhakti as well. Okay. Is everything clear? Okay. So we will stop the class here. Have a good day. कल करते हैं आगे का discussion.